Welcome to the Knock-On Effect podcast, where concussion meets conversation, with Adam Wood and Cliff Butler. Brought to you by Safeguarding You and the Melbourne Headache and Concussion Group. Let's get into this. All right, boys and girls, mums and dads, welcome back to the Knock-On Effect podcast with me, Adam Wood, and my partner in crime, Cliff Butler. Welcome back to episode 3. We've cracked down 2. We're on to now a really important topic around a return to play. But before we get into that, Cliff, you're still wearing Australia lacrosse t-shirt, mate. Tell us what happened.
I had to change it up, wash this one. Mate, look, yeah, some fantastic news for the girls over in China. So we had the women's sixes team over at the World Cup or World Games over there, playing against teams like America, Canada, Britain, China, Hong Kong. I don't think Hong Kong was there, but Japan, who seems to be one of our biggest rivals, emerging as one of our biggest rivals, and we got the bronze. So we got the job done in overtime. An amazing goal from Georgia Latch, who's actually a Footscray girl, and she's playing over there in at Loyola in America. And yeah, just so fantastic for the girls to cement that third place coming into the Olympics. So well done to everyone involved. So proud, and yeah.
Brilliant. We love a medal. And yeah, after they went down to the US, in China, right? The first that game.
Yeah, they went down to the US. Yeah, US and Canada got the better of us, and we've definitely got some work to do, and we know that. But I think this is just such an amazing motivation for everyone involved. We've got a young squad. We've got a lot of experience in the squad too. So really interesting to see what the next year or so looks like with that collective squad. Where it ends up, who ends in, who ends out. It's such an exciting time. I'm pumped, super pumped.
Brilliant. Love it, mate. Love it. All right, well, let's get into this. This is the Knock-On Effect podcast. All right, Cliff, talk us through, mate. We're going to get into, let's summarise a little bit from our last pod, because we covered a lot of ground in that. And I think we should probably, if you can, mate, just touch back over the highlights and then move, how that sort of translates into the actual stages of graded return to play. The AFL will be referencing some of their source material here, but obviously this is across the board in sport. But where do you want to start today, mate?
Yeah, mate, we definitely jumped around a little bit there, and they say each time you shoot a podcast, you get better. So hopefully we're on the upward trajectory, mate, with this. But yeah, I felt like we were a little bit, I was just a little bit kind of all over the shop the other week. So just wanted to kind of reiterate a few key points around that game day management that then feeds into that reporting in Player HQ, because that's really the important bit for parent trainers and also sports trainers, like we said last time. So just going back over that quickly, is on that game day, it's really important to recognize an impact and see it on the field as a sports trainer. And then we remove that player from the field. So the player's removed from the field, most important thing, and again, removing only after you've done your sports trainer, Dr. ABCs, Zs, whatever they are. And then we're, removing that player from the field, and we're immediately getting that CRT6 document and making sure that we're ruling out any red flags that may necessitate the player attending the ER. So we're going through those red flags. Then if those red flags aren't present, please remember, though, we're always looking for those red flags for that 4-hour period and beyond for that first night with those players. If any of those red flags start to emerge, you immediately take yourself to the ER or call an ambulance. So that's really important that we need to understand that. But if we wait 10 minutes after doing the red flag assessment, and then we go through and we look at the symptom assessment. So we're going through that and going, right, well, yeah, do they have any symptoms, or are they showing any visible cues? So we're looking for those visible cues. So they're not things that you're asking the player, they're things that you're looking for in the player. Do they look dazed? Do they look confused? Have they turned white? Are they having seizures or fits? So that's the observable things that you can see. So we've gone red flags, observables. Then we're going symptoms. So that's when we're starting to ask them questions. How do you feel? Do you feel sick? Are you nauseous? Are you drowsy? Do you want to go to sleep? Do you want to fight someone? Are you agitated? So they're the symptoms. Then we move on to the awareness, where we start asking them questions to ascertain their level of kind of awareness about what's going on. So just to reiterate, really important, remove the player, clear them of red flags, wait 10 minutes, look for the cues or the signs that you can see then start asking the player about what they're feeling and their symptoms, then start asking them questions to just gauge their neurocognitive activity and level of awareness. If you get a negative for any of those questions or observables, then that's it. You would rule them out of the game. They'd take no further part. So if they are slow to get up, or they look like they've lost consciousness, or they look like their day's blank or dizzy, that's it. Done. If you say to them, hey, are you feeling dizzy or nauseous, or do you have a headache, or do you feel like vomiting? Yeah, I do. Done. That's it. So the CRT makes it really, really simple. It steps you through. I know there's a lot of panic around this and a lot of nervousness from parent trainers, but you follow that CRT6, take a deep breath, take your time, work through it, then you will get through it and make the best choice.
When in doubt, sit them out, mate, is the prevailing rule, right? And that's what you're talking about, I guess.
Well, and you know, we were talking off air about, and you asked me a question about delayed onset of symptoms, and absolutely, we can have a delayed onset of symptoms up to 48 hours, maybe 1 or 2 days later. I've had patients come into the clinic. I said this last time, when we moved from 14 days to 21 days, people would try to see if the symptoms would come on. And so Thursday, the phone would ring hot because people are going, oh, now I feel sick and now I feel nauseous. So, you know, if it's really important to observe the impact. And if you think that impact, personally for me, if I see an impact that I think's worthy of removal from play, then almost the CRT6 is almost a formality for me, because the if in doubt, sit them out mantra just has to reign supreme.
Yeah. Yeah, and just to articulate the point I made is knowing what I now know about concussion guidelines, protocols. If someone was to pass a red flag and a symptom assessment after the game, there's still the reality that symptoms can occur 24, 48, as you say, up to
100%.
4 or 5 days later. So in that case, you should be assessing, if you've seen the incident, assess it by your own eyes as well, right? If they are groggy, but somehow 10 minutes later they pass an assessment, when in doubt, sit them out, and should be a prevailing
Yep.
rule.
100%, mate. And, we're not playing for sheep stations here. So, and brain health's super important. And that's,
Yep.
again, we keep reiterating that's why we're here. But anyway,
All right, great wrap up. So let's now move to, let's say you've done that, you've gone and got an assessment and you're diagnosed, you've got a concussion. There are now rules that we need to follow in sport around graded or phases of return to play. Okay, for some who have seen in the AFL world, they've actually got this one pager that's been going around for some time around the stages of graded return to play. They've broken it down into a little bit more visual graphic, which we'll walk our way through. But do you want to speak to this, mate? How do you follow this as an allied health professional that works in this space? Do you want to summarize it here, and then we could probably break it down into the actual stages and the steps involved?
absolutely. Look, this is the most important part for me as a concussion osteopath. This is the most important part of what we do. So, a diagnosis is essential and it's really important, but then it's about how you then return the player to play to give them the best opportunity to continue playing until they're 40. We don't want to be retiring players. And if we don't follow this process, then we don't give ourselves the best chance at recovery. So, this is really awesome from the AFL and obviously in conjunction with the AIS and the concussion consensus statement that they've put this data together. It's super easy to follow. The thing we need to remember is it's not just about sitting 21 days at home. You don't just get hit and they go, oh yeah, we suspect you've got a concussion. You get a diagnosis, they load you into play HQ, you're rubbed out for 21 days and you just come back. That's not good enough, right? You need to be doing this. You need to be doing this stuff. And we've got a number of stats, and I'm going to probably have to read them to you here because I'm not very good at remembering things. Maybe I've had too many concussions in my day, but I think it's really important to remember. So just on that immediate removal from play. So we talked about that previously, and I've got a stat here that basically says adolescents who continue to play post-concussion took on average 44 days to recover versus players that are immediately removed taking on average 21 days or 22 days when removed. So that's a telling stat, right? That's a huge stat. Get them off the ground, stop that process, the process within the brain kind of happening. It is an inflammatory process. It's a neural process. So the quicker you can get off and calm and relax yourself and bring your body temperature down, the better. And then just talking about that early assessment, like, don't wait for your symptoms to arrive. If you get seen by a professional in under 7 days, the stats say that if you go to somebody after 8 days or between 8 to 20 days, you're 5 times more likely to suffer a prolonged recovery of greater than 30 days. They're damning and stats. So it's important to get to an allied therapist to start this process appropriately. Um, there's a lot of fear and confusion that occurs around this time. And there's a lot of processes in your brain that lead to the symptoms or feelings of anxiety, sadness. You can be more emotional, more irritable. You're also probably having some sleep regulation issues at this time. You may be sleeping more or finding it hard to go to sleep. You may be confused and forgetful. This is a really scary time for someone who has never suffered a concussion before. And there's a podcast on the Imperfects recently with Joe Williams, rugby player, and talking about how he suffered concussions as a young fella and just how scary it was and the mental health impacts that it had on him immediately. The negative thoughts, going down that kind of tunnel of negative thoughts and negative behaviors. So I just think getting to the appropriate, empathetic, knowledgeable health professional within 48 hours to help understand what's going on inside your brain and inside your body, and to realize that you don't, if you manage it appropriately and you're aware of what the symptoms are and why you're feeling what you're feeling, then that can reduce that level of anxiety and help this process occur a lot more succinctly and efficiently. So that's
Yeah,
my
and
two
and it,
cents on getting in to see someone early.
yeah, and I agree, mate. I
Yeah,
see it anecdotally. I've luckily, fortunately, I've not been touched by concussion myself or my boys playing sport. But I know enough parents in his team that have, and their kid, and they talk with great shock and great fear around when you see your kid with a serious concussion. It is traumatic for the kid, but also or for the player, but also the parents themselves. So even just that peace of mind to know that there is a proper pathway to follow in diagnosing, in treating, and then in returning to play. Yeah, it's not just a thing for the player; it's also the parents and the caregivers.
exactly. And we went through the reasons why, that timeline of concussion, that pathophysiological occurrence that occurs in your brain where, the demand for energy is being shifted to healing as opposed to, daily tasks. And so, that 5 to 7 day mark, you're probably going to feel pretty crappy, and then you start to feel good. And as soon as we bring up that kind of flow chart, your graphic design skills made, you immediately see people relax, you see parents relax, and then the process can kind of start. Also, we got to come up with a better name for this, Adam, but the concussion cocktail that we've got, getting onto supplements early is really important for kind of really helping those symptoms to kind of be less and to move on more efficiently. So, your magnesium helping with blocking those calcium channels and allowing the brain to regulate its ionic balance. Getting on the creatine to help your brain with that energy so it can heal itself. Your vitamin D, your fish oils to help with the kind of the coverings of the brain cells. All of these things really help. And if you start them really early, then you give yourself the best chance at healing efficiently. So I think that's really important to get in and just get that sorted. And then
Yeah, and
kick
I
off
love it,
with,
mate. Who doesn't like a cocktail and one that's actually good for you? I
yeah,
like the name, mate. I think we stick with it. But
you're sticking with it. You're sticking with it.
mm,
So if we walk through the stages of graded return to play, and again, I really commend the AFL on getting this done. It's a fantastic initiative, and there's a lot of other sports that could follow suit, with this and take it a little, just take it a little more seriously. But obviously, we want some relative rest for the first 24 hours. So, um, you leave on the Sunday, you go home, you're monitored for 4 hours really closely by your guardian or parent or partner or loved one. You're not driving home, you're not drinking, not even a midi. You just kind of, you're going home and you're resting. Doesn't mean that's not sit in a dark room. That's an antiquated approach. You can do gentle day-to-day activities. You can get home, you can have a shower, you can watch a bit of TV. You're not going to binge watch Netflix all night, but you can watch a little bit of TV. And you've just got to do it within your symptom threshold. So if you sit down and you want to watch the Pies on Sunday, and you start to feel a little crook or dizzy or whatever, then you need to step away from that activity and give yourself a bit of a rest for a decent period of time. You're not going to jump on and play COD. It's not what you do. But you can text your mates. You can do those things. Take a snap of yourself and and get some sympathy from your friends. But
Well, and even on this side here, mate, it says limit screen time, right? Not completely remove yourself from screen time, but limit it
yep,
to just be within reason.
yep,
Yeah.
yeah. So that's that takes 1 to 2 days. So depending on how you're feeling, after 1 to 2 days, if you're feeling that your symptoms aren't getting worse, then we head into the stage 2 of the recovery. Now, this is really important. And I actually like to put actual days on this so that people precisely know what they're doing. And it's really great if you train on Tuesday and Thursday, because this makes it really simple for this thing here. So what we're doing now with stage 2 of recovery is we're starting to get into daily activities, and we're extending ourselves a little bit more. So probably this is your Monday or your Tuesday, where I like it if it's Monday. It's much better. The timeline fits a bit better. But if it's Monday, you're probably having the day off school as a child, or as a worker, you're not going to work, but you can start to maybe have a look at your emails, or maybe you can attempt a little bit of homework. Again, just depending on your symptoms. So, if you're progressing to the next stage, which is stage 2, which is aerobic exercise, basically if your symptoms aren't getting worse from the previous day. Now, just another little stat here saying, so we start exercise on the Tuesday if we can, and it's 15 minutes preferably. And I actually encourage the kids, if they can, to go down to training. So again, I want to preface all of this with it. This is dependent upon your symptoms. I had a guy in last week, and there was no way he was doing this, and his recovery was going to take 30 days because week 1 was really tricky, and we had to be quite intricate with what he couldn't do. It wasn't until I think Wednesday or maybe even Thursday that he could even look at an email. So everyone's different, right? But we're saying this is the standard approach to recovery, okay? And this is why it's important to work with a health professional, because you just can't grab this off the internet and do it yourself. I don't believe it's best to work with an individual who helps you work, because if things aren't going to plan, then you'll need a strategic and individualized approach on this.
Mm-hmm.
But we want to start some sub-symptom threshold exercise. So it's shown that if you start this in under 10 days, that your recovery is basically cut down. So you get to kind of 13 to 17 days, you start to feel better. But the main stat for this for me is that it reduces the chance or the hazard of persistent symptoms beyond 30 days by about 45%. So really important that we start this process. And what I love about this process is, I think people are thinking it's 21 days, I just can't do anything. When I tell them, no. Tuesday, you're going to go down to training. You're going to do 15 minutes of sub-symptom exercise at about 60% of norm. So maybe a walk, maybe a jog. Their eyes light up and they're oh great, here I go. I'm not hopeless. I can do something. This is great. So we had a couple of young fellas from the footy club I work with, and they came down on Tuesday and they were doing a brisk walk. It was pretty funny, a bit of the old Steve Monaghetti style. So they were bouncing a footy. The boys love seeing them there. Obviously, we need to be mindful of the lights and the motion and all the stuff. We wouldn't want to overwhelm them, and that would be a reason to then hold them off from doing this. But they were fine. And so this is the real kicker. So this is the one. you do not want your symptoms to increase by 2 out of 10. So if you turn up with a headache that's 5 out of 10 and it goes to 7 or out of 10, then that's a fail. Okay, especially if it doesn't resolve within an hour. So you get to training and you're there and you're doing your thing and your headache goes up to 7 out of 10 and you go to bed with that headache at 7 out of 10. That's a fail, right? So what you would need to do is wait 24 hours and then retry that step.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Okay.
Does that make sense? So these boys
Yep.
that came down, they're walking around the oval. If their headaches went up by 2 out of 10, they would take Wednesday off and they would try again on Thursday.
So you don't have to go back to step one. It's not like snakes and ladders where you fail and you go back to, Monopoly. Do not pass go. Do not collect your 200. In this case, you just go back to the stage you're at, give it
Yeah,
another
you just
24
retry,
hours
you
and
retry
reassess
that
it.
stage, give it 24 hours off and go back and retry
And you said
that step
sub-symptom.
again.
Was that the term you made? Sub-symptom training. So,
Sub-symptoms. So
uh,
yeah, you want to be working below your symptoms. So if your symptoms are a 2 out of 10, you don't want them to get any higher. So you want to
yeah,
you want to just, we call it tickling the symptoms or flirting with the symptoms. Like we want to push them up a little bit. So we want to keep like hitting the ceiling a little bit, but we don't want to push through so that we end up in bed for for Tuesday night and we're sick and we feel horrible because
yeah,
that kind of thing is going to not be good for us and it's going to maybe prolong our recovery, which isn't great.
yeah.
Um,
Gotcha.
yeah. So, and avoiding prolonged rest of greater than kind of 5 days, also lowers the duration of your symptoms as well statistically. So that's getting into some exercise when you're capable and ready, and when it doesn't blow your symptoms by more than 2 out of 10 is really important.
Okay, got it. Got it. And who
Yep.
should keep an eye on this, mate? Obviously, the player in the junior world, the parents should be involved and be keeping an eye on monitoring these symptoms. If a trainer's not present at training, obviously, preferably on game day they're around, but they won't be playing. So in a training environment, it's making sure that the player themselves are aware of this. Would you hope that the coaches, the team manager, any official or responsible person there should also be trying to keep an eye on that person's
Absolutely.
symptoms
And,
if they
and
are
yeah,
escalating?
look, I mean, well, every club's different, right? And I know that when we go down, I went down to training on the Tuesday and Thursday this week. I'm there most weeks anyway, but I made an actual effort to go down and make sure these boys were okay and watch them and keep them accountable and get them doing what they need to do. So, but I think there's no reason why, we've got an assistant coach, we've got a coach. Often there's another parent there. I can't see why the coaches can't be made aware of it and be watching Johnny do laps around the oval and making sure that he's okay. But
Mhm.
I mean, yeah, young players, obviously the parent I think needs to get involved. If you're over 18, you're probably looking after yourself with some care from there's usually a concussion manager within most clubs these days, as dictated by the AFL. So they should be across this as well.
Okay, awesome. All right, so we're in
Yep.
stage two. We're in step two with light aerobic exercise. We pass that and we move on to step three, moderate.
So moderate aerobic exercise. So this is where we're kind of going, hey, let's get this kind of moving a little bit. So we start to get into that kind of 60 to 80% range. And so again, if we've passed the light aerobic, now we're into the moderate aerobic, which is we try to push for about 30 minutes of this. So this is probably a bit more higher intensity work. You're probably jogging, pushing yourself. Great to have it's great to have a wristwatch on to know where your heart rate's at. And just on that, I think we as well, just going back to why it's important to see an allied therapist is if you go and see a concussion allied therapist, what they should do within the first week of seeing you is something called a Buffalo concussion treadmill test, which is you basically put a polar heart rate monitor on or some kind of heart rate monitor on, and you're walking for 15 minutes, and every minute your treadmill goes up by a degree incline, and I do it every 2 minutes. You're asked about how hard you're working and what symptoms you have. So the idea of this test is to actually ascertain your sub-symptom exercise threshold. So, if your symptoms come on, you would say, right, if they come on at, say, 140 beats per minute, we would subtract 20% and we would have you working in a heart rate zone. So we know what's going to provoke you and not provoke you. So we would work you in that zone. So, you may have a concussion, and, your first light aerobic exercise session might be between 120 and 130 beats per minute, and that's where you're comfortable and you're not feeling symptoms. So that's just a little bit extra when you see an allied therapist. That again, we talk about that individualized approach, that we can actually be really certain that we're going to get a positive outcome by knowing what your actual numbers are. So just another endorsement for coming and seeing a
And that
therapist.
was a buffalo that was a Buffalo concussion heart rate test, did you say?
A Buffalo concussion treadmill test. Yeah.
Treadmill test, right? Okay, yeah,
Yep.
brilliant. I mean, mate, some of the
Yep.
things you've talked to me about, there is a real science and a real formula to a return to play that we
And
could
look,
probably
and,
cut
and
into a bit more detail later.
like we say, I talk in my clinic about gold, silver, and bronze standard approaches to treatment, because everyone's got different time restraints, different financial restraints. And so we always try to get the best fit for people. So not everyone, you might go to the therapist and get your diagnosis, and then do the stage, the return to play stages. And that's why we're having this talk, to help people be able to work through them of their own accord, and to know what to do and how to interpret them. But if you are under the care of somebody, then you get a little bit more strategic advice. So we would know, hey, don't go over 130 beats per minute, because that's definitely going to put you into the wrong area that we don't want to get into. So if you work between 120 and 130 on Tuesday night and you feel great, then maybe we'll up it by 5 on Wednesday night when you go to the next level and we do this. So we can be a little bit more strategic with how we run that. But yeah, Wednesday night and Thursday night, really want you running for 30 minutes at kind of 80% max heart rate, or between 60 and 80% max heart rate. Same rules apply. We don't want an increase greater than 2 out of 10 for longer than 1 hour.
Got it. Okay, got it, mate. Stage two, we're still here. Now we're in step four. And so now we've moved up to high intensity aerobic exercise. Walk us through that, mate.
So I really like in this one to get my players to be the water person for the weekend. So on the Saturday or the Sunday, I would say, hey, why don't you run water? Because really, when you're running water, you got to run out, run in. There's a bit of like interval training, high intensity type stuff. You feel like you're part of it. There's noise, there's things happening. So if you can get through that without an increase in your symptoms, then you've done pretty well. So I really like to do that one with my guys. If not, 40 to 45 minutes of kind of sprint work or interval training's really good, getting you up to a maximum heart rate. So I often get people to do kind of 40-meter sprints in 20-second intervals. Like, so you've got kind of 20 seconds to go from there to there, and then 20 seconds to go from there to there. So you should have a bit of a rest period in that, and you work down kind of 10, 8, 6, 4. So you're really going to get your heart rate up. And so that's that recovery stage. So really important that we get back there. Great for me as a practitioner to know that you're moving through the gears and that you're not provoking your symptoms. And so I would feel comfortable moving you into stage 3. Also great for you as a player to know and have the confidence to go, yeah, I'm getting through this without symptoms. I'm not broken. I can do this. So,
Yep.
But stage 2 for me is probably the most important stage of the recovery out of all of those stages.
And on this slide, we can see here, you can start high intensity aerobics, you can go up to maximum heart rate, still no team training drills, but you can start gentle resistance training of 50 to 75% of usual load. What do we mean here by resistance training?
Yeah, so you can just get back in the gym. So a lot of players are all like, when can I get back in the gym? When can I get back in the gym? Well, okay. You can get back in the gym provided that, you're not getting worse by, again, I keep saying this, 2 out of 10 for an hour. You can go back into the gym and you can start doing some resistance training. Obviously, we're just mindful of like a lot of the, the bending down, the bending up, the increased intracranial pressure with that. So that's why we hold that off until probably the weekend after your concussion. So if you concussed on the Sunday here, the following Sunday or Saturday, you might be able to go in the gym and just do some gentle resistance training. So, if you bench press 50 kilos, you're bench pressing, 25, 30. Yeah.
Yep. Awesome. Got it. Great. And so now you've passed stage 2, we're into stage 3, and this is graded loading program, mate. So we start with non-contact training.
Yeah. So the really important bit there before you go into stage 3 is that you need to be back at school. You need to be back at work, right? So You need to have no symptoms at rest, and you need to have no symptoms at high intensity training. So, this is I say stage 2 recovery is the most important bit to do, but this is the most important kicker, or the most important circuit breaker that we need to remember. So those last 2 weeks, so we're sitting people out for 3 weeks. So week 1 is all about rest at the start, and then recovering and getting your aerobic exercise in. But and then once we hit that Monday of the second week, we must be symptom free for 14 days. Right. So you cannot, if you need to be completely recovered, no headache, no symptoms, no, you're at school, you're going, you're studying, you're at work, it's all good, 0 symptoms. Right. We don't want to see any symptoms there. So then you can then progress into that graded loading program. So the important thing to remember here, though, is if you progress into that graded loading program and you get a symptom that pops up that you're familiar with, you need to go back to stage 2.
Yep.
So you would go back to that, high intensity aerobic exercise. You may even fall back to the moderate aerobic exercise, depending on how bad your symptoms are. And again, this is why it's important to be managed by a professional. But yeah, if you have a symptom in this stage 3, you're going back to stage 2. So
And is it the 24-hour rule again and try again, or
yeah,
would you
yeah.
just
Wait
in this
24 hours.
scenario
Yep.
give
No,
yourself a
no.
little
Head
longer?
back. No, I'd give yourself 24 hours. Everyone's different, but I'd give
Mm.
yourself 24 hours before going again. You don't want to be stuffing this up and messing around with this. So,
Yep.
being conservative is really important.
Yep.
So what we're going to do then is we're going to go to non-contact training. So my 2 boys have been really excited this week. They've done non-contact training last night under my watchful hawk eyes. They got asked 42,000 times whether they had any symptoms and whether they felt okay. And so they're back with the team. They're warming up. They're doing the ground ball drills. They're doing the handball drills. They're doing the kicking drills. They're doing the full ground drills. They are not doing any scrimmage work. They're not doing any tackle work, no bump work, no competitive work. So again, what I would do here, so it's a minimum of 7 days. So what I would do here is I would have the non-contact training on Tuesday and Thursday, right? Some people go, just do a half session on Tuesday and then do a full session on Thursday. That's up to the individual and the professional, but I just usually monitor the guys when I'm there. But if I wasn't there, then I might be a little more inclined to say, just do half the session and see how you feel. So that's important there.
Yep.
So no symptoms. We're feeling really good. We then get into that the next week, which is that limited contact training. This one is when it starts to get exciting, right? So we head in. I usually put a fluoro bib on the player at this point in time, and they're allowed to get involved in drills that have kind of incidental or controlled contact. So probably not doing the scrimmage work, but if there's bump bags or there's something like that's going to be controlled, or some controlled tackling, off you go. So head out there. We don't want consecutive days. So if this happens on the Tuesday, then you wouldn't do the next session until the Thursday, right? Because we want to give that a little bit of time to recover. And again, you might do, some people go, let's do half the session contact and half the session non-contact. Again, that's depending upon the individual, I think. If I'm there I'm there and able to check in, or someone's able to check in, then you probably can manage that yourself. Again, though, must be completely free of concussion symptoms. We don't want any symptoms at this point, because if you get to this point and you have symptoms, guess where you're going, Adam?
Straight back to step 1.
Snakes and ladders, back to that high
Yep.
intensity aerobic exercise, right? So we don't want to go back there.
Yep.
So we try to avoid that. On the Wednesday of the third week, and I often tell patients in the first week to do this, I say, book yourself a GP appointment on the Wednesday of the third week, right? Or the Thursday morning, because you will need a clearance from your GP before you start full contact training on the Thursday. Now, if you come to Melbourne Headache and Concussion Group, you'll rock into your GP with a cover letter, it all outlined. all your testing results, and it'll show that you've gone down to 0 symptoms and you're looking really fantastic. And you hand the folder over to the GP, and they go, "Yep, that looks great, no dramas. I'm happy to sign you off." So
Mhm.
then on the Thursday, you're into full contact training. Bib comes off, mouth guard out of the sock, and we're ready to go. So again, though, we need to remain completely free of concussion symptoms. And I think one thing we also need to remember here, the player needs to feel comfortable to return to full contact play. And I think that's really, really important that we are asking the player how they feel, because we've just talked about those emotional symptoms at the start. And it can be quite scary for, say, a 15-year-old boy who's probably never really felt sad, or maybe never really felt depressed or anxious, or you know, to come through this. It's quite confronting. So and also, the fear of being hit again and having to go through those feelings, those uncontrolled feelings. So we need to make sure that the player's 100% ready to go.
Yep. Yep. No, but great point. And just to double back on that, mate, you made the point about the GP, and can you just explain to us, in the world of footy or AFL footy, a GP is the only one who can provide a medical clearance? Other sports, perhaps not
At
the
the
case. Do you
moment,
want to just clarify that?
yeah, yep. At the moment, that's the case. We need to go and have a general practitioner sign off. I'm hoping that they're going to change that to, concussion trained allied therapists. But at the moment, it's a GP, and we just try to make the job for the GP as simple as possible. Like I said, 60% of GPs in Perth or in WA feel confident dealing with concussion. That's not a lot.
Mm,
The GPs I've spoken to have kind of said, "Oh, well, if you can provide us with all the info, then great, because we don't know, we don't really want to, they don't really know that much about it."
mm.
Um, so, or managing it, still the specifics of it, I should say. I sound terrible there, but yeah. So because there's a responsibility and an onus there that if they sign off on that player to go back, then they're involved in the process, aren't they? And you're
Yep.
probably the better person to speak to about the legality of those things.
Yeah, and,
Yeah.
and even I think we're finding, even you go to a GP who doesn't know about the specifics of concussion, for legal liability risks, they're more likely to say just sit you out, because if they
Yeah.
don't know, the risk to them is too great. So the idea of getting at least diagnosed, and then obviously the return to play treatment plan from someone who knows what they're talking about, just makes sense. And
Well,
if you're not concussed, you'll know with specificity that they're not concussed, and you'll return them to play because you know how to actually conduct that diagnosis. Whereas a GP who doesn't may likely just err on the side of caution and sit you out.
but I also had an example of one that recently had their timeline wrong. I think they were saying that day one starts from the day of diagnosis, and so it was like, oh, got to see you on the Wednesday, so day one's the Thursday, and it was like, no, 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 no.
Yep.
Day one is the Monday after the Sunday, or the Sunday after the Saturday. That's day one.
Yep.
Day zero is the event. So, yeah, we don't want people sitting out extra days as well. But also, just the main question they ask is, have you been symptom free for 14 days? And they're relying on your honesty. Whereas
Hmm.
when you come and see us at the Melbourne Headache and Concussion Group, you roll in with objective data and objective tests that show that you've been symptom free from the Sunday of the first week.
Yep. Yep. Brilliant. All right, let's move on, mate, and wrap this up, because once you pass stage 3, you're into stage 4, which seems like you get a little green star in this slide here. Tell us about stage 4, mate.
Oh, stage four is you're back playing footy, or back playing the sport that you love. Obviously, this is quite specific to AFL. I would like all codes to follow this. Your basketball, your netball, and lacrosse is following this, which is fantastic. Well done to Lacrosse Victoria there in implementing this policy. Yeah, so you are back, baby, and you are ready to go. Don't ask me about putting a helmet on your son or your daughter, because we'll talk about that later, but it's not going to help. And yeah, you've just got to, hopefully they're as ready as they can be to go and play, and they get back in and enjoy the game that they love.
Brilliant. Brilliant. We've covered a lot, mate. What I'd like to do is actually just run back over things, and just perhaps so we can clip this, actually walk through these slides super quickly, summarize it so that we can so that people can be reminded of what we've gone through in some detail, and perhaps we can clip it and share it as well. Okay, mate. So talk us through these stages. Just give us a highlight summary of the stages of return to play.
Get the highlight reel. So, mate, the first stage here is relative rest. So, gone are the days of sitting in a dark room and not looking at your phone or not doing anything. We now know that we can actually do some gentle day-to-day activities. You can make yourself some eggs. You can have a shower, walk the dog if you feel up to it. Basically, you're limiting your screen time because your brain needs time to heal. We remember that 60% of our brain's function goes towards visual interpretation. So that if you can kind of lower that the visual demand on your body, then you can start that healing process a lot more quickly and allow your brain to do what it needs to do. So I'm not saying don't text your mate or don't hit a snap of your sad face on the couch. But we want to try to have some relative rest for the first 24 to 48 hours, during which time you should be seeking the assistance of a trained health professional as well to get specific and individualized help.
Okay, mate. Stage two, recovery.
Stage 2 recovery. So hopefully this is on the Monday. We're looking to just increase those daily activities. We can go for a short walk. We can walk the dog. Chuck on some sunnies if you've got a bit of light sensitivity. We're still limiting our screen time. We're just depending on the symptoms. So maybe you can check an email. Maybe you can do some work. It's all very dependent upon the individual, but you're definitely not going and running and doing footy training at this stage.
And stage two, mate. Step two, light aerobic exercise.
So we're hoping that this is on the Tuesday. So this is where we can start activities like jogging, walking, cycling. We're usually doing this at about 50 to 60% of our maximum heart rate. So you can work that out, 220 minus your age, and then work back from there. Again, we're not going to the gym. We're not running around at footy training, but you can go to footy training and do laps around the oval and feel like you're part of the team.
Awesome. Step three in stage two, moderate aerobic exercise.
So we're getting up to the moderate aerobic exercise level now. Now, it's important to remember that in light aerobic and in moderate aerobic exercise, that we're not allowing our symptoms to increase by more than 2 out of 10 for longer than an hour. If that happens, you need to wait 24 hours and retry that step. So we're at moderate aerobic exercise. We're going for a jog now. We're at footy training. We're bouncing the ball. We're going for a run. We're not getting involved in drills. We're still not at the gym, but we're lifting that heart rate to about 60 to 80% of our maximum.
Awesome. And step four, mate, high intensity.
Step 4. So this is on the weekend. We can go out and run water for the footy team. Fantastic way to increase your high intensity workout, running out there, delivering the water to the boys and girls. If you're not going to do that though, I'd suggest getting out and getting stuck into some sprint work. This needs to probably be 40 minutes worth of exercise. So you can do 40 meter sprint intervals or kind of whatever kind of interval you want to do. But we really want to get that heart rate up to maximum. We're still not training with our team, but we can go to the gym at this stage and do kind of 50 to 70% of our usual resistance loads. So really exciting to be doing this within a week of having a concussion.
Excellent. We pass that, we move on to stage 3, graded loading, mate. What's step 1 here?
So the most important thing is there's a big barrier between stage 2 and stage 3, and that is your symptoms. You must be at school, at work, symptom-free, and not getting any symptoms while you're doing that high-intensity training. If you have cleared that and you're moving into this stage, you need to be symptom-free from now until you return to sport, which is 14 days. Really, really important. So here we go, where we can return to those team training sessions. We're not allowed to do any contact. So you can get involved in the drills, the warm-up, the kicking, all those kind of things, but we cannot get involved in the scrimmage work. So if you have any symptoms come during this time, you've got to go back to stage 2, and you probably need to be consulting with your health professional around your pathway forward.
Gotcha. Step 2, still within stage 3. So now we're up to limited contact training.
So we're in step 2, we're in limited contact training. So you've done 2 days of non-contact training in week 2. We are now in week 3. It is super exciting because you are going to go and see the GP tomorrow and get a clearance for full contact training on Thursday if you get through tonight. So what we need to do is we put a bib on, we get out with the team, and we can do incidental or controlled contact. So bump bags, things that are controlled tackling, probably not getting involved in the scrimmage at this stage, but we need to be completely symptom-free before we go to the GP. And we should have at least a day's break before we do the next session.
Gotcha. Which is, so in this case, full contact?
Full contact. So once we've gone to the GP and we've proven that we're 14 days symptom-free, then we can get clearance for full contact training. So bib comes off, mouth guard out the sock, and it's go time.
Go time means you pass that, you get into stage 4, and you are congratulations, you're ready to play, mate. This is what everyone waits for, right?
Super exciting. We've got a couple of guys that we're hoping are going to come back to playing next week, second week of the finals. How exciting. So yeah, this is what everyone waits for. And if done properly, you should be confident to return to sport.
Brilliant. Mate, you nailed it. That was awesome. The quick summary, brilliant. The full pod, amazing. Once again, you've gone detailed, mate. Anything else you want to add before we wrap this up?
No, nothing to add. I think it's just I do want to do a little shout out to Wendy from Happy Lids. We talked about her boy Antonio, who unfortunately terribly passed away due to a second impact syndrome incident in Adelaide. It was his birthday this week, so we're thinking about you guys. And again, that's a motivational force for us here to be doing this podcast to increase awareness, increase safety, and just make sure that kids get back to playing the game they love safely. So yeah, happy birthday. Shout out Wendy and the crew at Happy Lids. And yeah, let's look after our kids.
Yeah, well played, mate. And anyone wondering what Happy Lids is, go and check them out. It's an incredible cause. It's a brilliant story. Hopefully we'll have Wendy on the podcast to talk us through her experience. And mate, thank you once again. That's pod 3 down. We'll look forward to seeing you next week for the next one.
See you then, guys.
Okay.
Best of luck to all the junior teams out there playing in finals this week.
Yeah, round 1 of finals. Yes, good luck.
Except if you're playing against Williamstown Juniors. Then
or the Dolphins. Yeah. All right, mate. See you later, buddy.